Welcome to Next to Madison, a podcast to help you live your best life.
Next to Madison. On today's episode, I am sitting down with elite fitness coach Dustin Pederson, who is going to talk to us all about stress management, eating right, how to gain optimal nutrition and health, GLP-1s, how to reset your own insulin on your own versus having to default to the GLP-1s. All this good stuff, optimal sleep, the importance of hydration in the morning. We cover so much stuff. I would bookmark this episode. I would be taking notes. There are so many like supplements, types of supplements, brands of supplements that are going to give you the optimal nutrition that your body really needs. But I learned so much, and I'm going to make so many tweaks into my health habits to make sure I'm running optimally, because it is true. The more in shape you are, the more healthy you are, the more money you're going to make, and the better you're going to be for other people around you to live that ultimate life. So it all goes together, starting really with how you feel. So you're going to love this episode. We'll be right back after this brief message on Next to Madison.
It's your host, Madison Malloy, and I have exciting news. My new product is now available on Amazon called Color Your Way to Abundance, a 21-day manifestation guide for wealth, health, and love. This unique coloring journal will help you manifest by coloring in the affirmations while you continue to repeat them. This will help activate these affirmations so they become a reality. Grab your copy today and relax, color, and start manifesting.
We are back on this fun episode of Next to Madison with our guest. He is going to talk about, as I said on the intro, all things nutrition and fitness, stress relief, sleep, you name it. You've got to live your healthiest life if you want to accomplish what you truly want. So that being said, Dustin Pederson, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Madison. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I was thrilled to have you. We met through a mutual friend, because you're an elite fitness coach and you specialize in nutrition and training and optimal sleep. And this is such a key thing, because so many people want to manifest things or make more money or have healthy relationships or whatever it is they want. But all of the other stuff also starts with your health. So that's got to be kind of number one. And there's a direct correlation between how in shape you are and how much money you actually make.
It's crazy, but there is.
Yeah, so we'll get into that as well. So tell us, just give us your brief background.
Yeah, so I actually didn't initially get into health and fitness until later in my life. I went to college and undergrad for elementary education. I taught special ed for about 10 years. And through that process, I had been coaching people on the side as just like a side job, as a way to bring in more money to my teaching career.
Yeah.
And I became more and more passionate about it. And I got to a point where I had moved away and moved back to where I am now at the beginning of the school year, and all the teaching positions were filled. And so my wife was like, let's do it. Let's go full time, see what you can do. And she kind of allowed me to follow my actual dream and make that pivot.
That's amazing. Well, you have a great wife, great life partner. And that's really, when you're looking for life partners, it's somebody that's going to support you fully.
Absolutely.
You know? So that is absolutely amazing. So how did you get into fitness in the first place? Like, were you overweight as a child? Did you have eating problems? Like, what was it that kind of piqued this?
So I was actually the opposite of that. I was athletic, but I only to a degree. Like, I always had friends who were better at baseball than me, better at sports than me, whatever it was. I could do it, and I could do it well enough, but I was never great at it. And I was kind of a skinny fat kid. There's this one picture that sticks into my mind. It's back home, and I can tell you exactly where it is. It's in my parents' living room. It's in a really ugly frame. It's on the and I think it's when I was 12 or 13. We were at a beach. It was a family reunion. And I kind of had my arms behind me, like leaning back on my arms, my shirt off. And like, I just was soft and saggy, and I kind of had man boobs. And I was like, that's not what a man is supposed to look like. And in college, I remember going on that tour initially of the University of Minnesota with my parents. And my dad made such a dad comment. We were walking by the rec center where the gym was. And the woman was like, well, if you'd like, I can show you into the rec center. You can see what that's all about. And my dad was like, well, is my tuition going to be paying for it? I was like, oh, Dad, come on. But ultimately, we went in and we looked at it, and I was sitting in my dorm one day in the middle of winter and it was probably like 4 degrees out. And I was like, well, I can sit in here and do nothing, or I can head over to the gym. And so that was kind of the start of everything. I hadn't done anything in college or in high school as far as sports athletics. So it was just walking into the gym and like that guy looks like he knows what he's doing and that guy. So I'm gonna watch you and wait till you leave the room and then I'm gonna try it on my own. So that's really where it all started.
Yeah, I love it. So you've really, since college, have had this peak interest in fitness, and it's been a very important part of your life. So when you started training and developed a successful business, like was it people coming to you, or was this just something you needed to subsidize because you didn't make enough?
Yeah, it started off as a little bit of both. So, in between college and grad school, I was working at LA Fitness and I was just selling memberships. I wasn't even doing personal training. And I had a good friend who was doing personal training and she was also a competitive bodybuilder. So she was doing her first figure competition. And we would train together. And come the day of her show, she wanted me to be there. And so I was like, well, of course. I went, and this was when men's physique was a newer division for men. And I
Yeah.
looked on stage and I looked at me and I said, like, that's not that far off. I could do that. And so I got introduced to her coach and started going through the process. And, you start prepping your meals and you start bringing your food with you to work and bringing your food with you to maybe places that are less normal. And everybody starts off saying, why? Why are you doing that? Why do you have to bring your meals? Like, don't you know we're going to lunch? They have food there. Like, you don't have to bring that. And it eventually transitions from why are you doing it to how are you doing it? And that's after the results come. So everybody thinks it's weird initially, and there's a lot of pushback and a lot of resistance. But then once they see what comes on the other side, they're like, how did you do that? And that's when I started helping other people. I was like, well, honestly, I just did what my coach told me. So I can help you. I can tell you what he told me. And that seemed to work. And then after I started getting results for other people, I got really curious. And I was like, well, how come it worked really well for Steve, but it didn't work at all for Sarah? Like, what's the difference there? And so I started to educate myself. Like I said, I already had been to college and to grad school, so education is really something that's important to me. And so I kept digging and I kept taking classes and certifications, and um, ultimately that led to being able to charge money for it, and then to do it part time while I was teaching because I had summers, and then led me to be able to do full time after I had left teaching.
So you brought up something about the meals and the meal prep, and that's like a big part, especially with competition training. So what were some of those meals that you had to eat?
Super, super typical stuff. Like when you think of bodybuilders and you think chicken, rice, broccoli, um, but it's just your lean protein. So you want to think
Okay.
about like egg whites, eggs, whole eggs when you can, when you've got the extra fat, chicken breast, lean ground turkey, lean cuts of steak, some white fish, and then obviously like some salmon and some good healthy omega 3s when you have enough fats for it. And then, your complex carbs when you don't need the starchy ones. So like your white rice after a workout to get those to have that higher insulin response. Your complex carbs like your brown rice, your sweet potatoes, things like quinoa.
Yeah. So you mentioned white rice. Why white rice after a workout?
So it's just like every carbohydrate, especially, has a different glycemic load and a rating on the glycemic index, and that just refers to like what response does your body have to eating that food? And so when you are post workout, you've spent a lot of glycogen. Glycogen is just carbohydrates. Your muscles run on carbohydrates, and that's where they get stored. So you want to replenish as much of that glycogen as you can. And in a way to do that faster is you want a food that's high glycemic. So you want it to be higher on the glycemic index. White rice is just higher than brown rice. It's more starchy. Same thing with like a white potato or a red potato versus a sweet potato.
Okay, gotcha. Because it was always that misconception, and maybe it's still true that you need to have a protein shake after you work out.
Totally. And you would want to have protein with that. Just so like a meal of just a carbohydrate will only get you so far. If we're looking at muscle protein synthesis, which is what occurs when you start to eat food after a workout or in response to a workout. If this is your base level and you eat just protein, you're going to have this much muscle protein synthesis. If you eat just carbohydrate, you might have a little bit less than that. But when you eat them together, you get the greatest response. So you want to have a good amount of carbohydrate and a good amount of protein, but those ratios are just relative to your goal. So like what I should have is way different than Madison, what you would have. Same with my clients.
Right. So it's well, especially if you're talking about people so if people are trying to gain muscle and lose weight, like what are the ultimate number of calories they can eat? Is it 1,200 usually for everybody?
That's a really good question. Have you ever seen online, they do those macro calculators where it's like plug in your height and your weight and we'll tell you how much calories and stuff you should eat?
I think so, yeah.
So oftentimes people will start with those, and some of them are okay. Some of them will give you a ballpark. Same thing with MyFitnessPal. It's an app that pretty much everybody's heard of. If you've tracked macros, it's probably the one that you've used. And it basically, you enter your stats, your height, your body weight, sometimes your body type, whether you are an ectomorph, a mesomorph, or an endomorph, just like how you typically gain weight, or if it's easy or difficult for you. And then
Okay.
it says, based on your stats and your goal of losing weight or gaining weight, you should have this many grams of protein, this many grams of carbs, this many grams of fat. However, the biggest issue with things like that is they give you a good starting spot, but they never ask you, what are you doing today? So, in order for me to tell a client what they need to do today, I have to know what they did yesterday and the day before. So, a good example is there was V Shred. His name's Vince something. He's all over like your Facebook ads probably. But he said he developed this, world's most accurate macro calculator. And I was like, all right, let's put this to the test. I'm a really good example of this because I'm trying to gain as much weight as I can. So what I did was I said that I have a hard time gaining weight and I am trying to gain as much weight as possible. So I knew that combination would tell me to eat the most amount of calories. So after it pumped out all the information, it said that I should be eating 30, or excuse me, 43 to 4,500 calories, which sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
What it didn't take into consideration is that I was already eating over 1,000 calories more than that. So if I would have followed that plan, I would have been moving the opposite direction for my goals. So without knowing where a person is today, you can't give them accurate or reliable information about what's going to get them closer to their goals.
Okay, that makes sense. Right. So you need to, so if you were starting with a client like me, for example, you would say, what did you eat yesterday? What did you do yesterday? Like, what's that whole
Yeah.
process?
So first we have to see if it's a good fit. Because when people buy personal training, they're not really buying my programs, they're buying me. So they have to know, do I like this guy? Does he mesh well with me? Is his personality and mine going to clash? So we have a call and we kind of figure that out. I get a really good picture of who you are and what your goals are. And then if we decide my program's the perfect fit for you, then I send you my intake form. And on that intake form, it's going to have you fill out, what's a typical day like for your eating schedule. And then I usually want to have you track your food for about a week. And it could be just writing it down in a food journal. It could be using an app like MyFitnessPal, basically wherever you're comfortable. And then when I get that information, I can use that data to figure out, okay, this is roughly the protein, fat, and carbs or the calories that they were eating. And now if this is our goal, this is probably what we want to do. Now, having worked in the space for over 10 years, I have a really good idea of where we need to go without any of that information. But the more information we have, the better informed I am, the better program I can initially make. And then what people I think forget is that just like if you were to go to the gym and do like a 5 pound curl every day, like it might be hard the first time, but a week later, a month later, that's not hard anymore because your body has adapted to that. So the same thing happens with your nutrition. You're going to adapt to that new calorie level. And if you started losing weight, eventually that's going to become like your new baseline and you're going to have to adjust that. So every week we check in and we say, all right, what's happening with the body? How is the strength? How are the workouts? How's the sleep? How's the nutrition? How's the stress? And based on all of those markers, that's what we use to determine what the next move is going to be.
Okay, so it's like a week you need to adjust your eating based on your
Yeah,
goals.
basically, I just want to make sure that my clients are staying accountable. So a lot of times going past a week, it's really easy for people to slip, especially if these are new habits. So everything we do is on a week to week basis. Um, and it's mostly nutrition. I'm going to build out your training program for like 12 weeks, and then we'll make small adjustments throughout that.
Yeah.
But, if you come to me and you said you reported eating, you know, 1,500 calories last week, and now I used my information and made our first meal plan, but you were actually wrong and you were eating 2,000 calories. Well, now we're going to see like, okay, so this meal plan that I wrote for you doesn't quite fit. So now I have to readjust that and see if we're moving in the right direction. And then we check in the next week and say, okay, now we're on the right path. Now we'll keep going with that. And then the next week, if things are still moving in the right direction, we keep going. If not, we readjust.
Okay. And so what do you think about, because people are busy, they don't have a lot of time. What do you think about some of these, meal prep services?
They can be
Like,
really great. A lot of times, the best part about those meal prep services is that you're just eating more healthy food. I use one because of time. Like I have my business to run. I have my family. My wife is of the director of a volleyball program, so she works really late on a couple of nights, and I have to get my son to baseball practice and baseball games 3 days a week. So the less time I can spend in the kitchen, the better. So a lot of people will see really good results just ordering food. They're just not going to go out for food. If it's Hello Fresh or this I'm blanking on all the other ones, but
Factor Five
if
is
that
another one.
prepared in your yeah, exactly. Um, that's going to be a much healthier option than like, oh, I'll stop at McDonald's on the way. So simply cleaning those things up is going to be huge. But then after a certain point, if you just keep eating those same meals, it's going to be roughly the same amount of calories. Your body's going to get used to that. And the change you see physically is just going to start to get smaller and smaller. So they're really great, but still need to be adjusted.
Okay. And so is weight loss and optimal nutrition or fitness, it's really, is it the 80/20 rule where it's 80% of what you eat and 20% of the workout?
Yes and no.
Okay.
If we look at what the research says, I know I'm so bad at giving you like a yes or a no example or answer. I always tell my clients, I'm like, if you don't have time for a little bit of an explanation, you got to wait because I'm going to
Yeah.
give you one. But what the research shows us is that if you just train, you're going to lose a moderate to small amount of weight. If you're just going to do your nutrition, you're going to lose a moderate amount of weight. If you do training and nutrition, you're going to lose the most amount of weight. So ideally, if I had to tell somebody to pick one, I would say focus on your nutrition. But if I had my way, I would say let's focus on your nutrition and get to the gym.
Okay. And what do you think about the rise in like GLP-1 shots?
It's interesting. And I've been trying to really formulate how I feel about them because ultimately I got into health and fitness coaching because I want to help people live a healthier life. When you are a healthier person, you have more energy and you can show up better to your family, to your business, wherever it is.
Yeah.
So if a GLP-1 is going to help you do that, then to some extent, I'm okay with it. There are like psychological and physiological reasons that people have the struggles they do with food. So, if you are coping with like some kind of trauma from when you were younger and you've always used food to do that, me putting together a nutrition plan and telling you like this is what you need to do, come on, you can do it, I'm your biggest cheerleader, is only going to go so far because there is a psychological issue to be addressed. And so we can
Oh.
use it something like a GLP-1 to really turn down that hunger signal and to help change the mindset around food. Now we can potentially work on like, hey, what is that thing that's really, really a struggle? Because I know a lot of personal trainers end up being therapists, and like, I am not qualified to deal with your childhood trauma or whatever it is. But I can certainly help and give you feedback, and if that feedback is, hey, something came up, maybe we should go talk to somebody else, that's only going to help.
Yeah. No, yeah, you always forget that like sometimes overeating is linked to childhood trauma.
Yeah, and it may not be childhood. It may be PTSD from a car accident that you had, and like food was just a thing that you coped with.
Yeah, no, that's true. There's like all these yeah, and the thing with the GLP-1s too is like a lot of people when they get off of them end up gaining a lot of weight back because the hunger comes like roaring back.
Right. And they didn't
And
work on those the structure and the routine and the habits. It was just like, well, I'm not eating because I'm not hungry. And now when the hunger comes back, you don't know what to do, like you mentioned.
Yeah, so it's really kind of retraining your lifestyle while you're on those. So don't use it as a crutch, but use it as like a substitute to get you where you need to go.
Right. And if it's, and they do a really, really good job of helping you reset your insulin sensitivity. And that's basically a huge point of my program is
Yeah.
because of the foods that we choose to eat, we have a lot of insulin resistance. And when we have a lot of insulin resistance, it means it takes your body a lot of insulin to get your blood sugar down. That leads to things like type 2 diabetes. And then, even we're starting to call things like Alzheimer's and dementia type 3 diabetes because of their effect on insulin in the brain, and things like that. So they're going to do a really nice job helping you reset your insulin sensitivity. So part of my program is like, there's a couple of different ways that we can do it, but ultimately, we want to pull down the level of carbohydrate that you have so your body can get used to burning fat for fuel. Because if your insulin is
Right.
always really, really high, all of the carbs that you eat are going to get converted to triglycerides and stored as fat. And if
Right.
you're,
Okay.
yeah, if you're already storing the carbs as fat, and that's the easiest energy in your body. If you're storing the easy stuff as energy, well, you're definitely going to store the fat too. And so it makes it really hard to lose weight when you're constantly just storing everything because you're not spending that. Your body's just like, holy crap, there's so much of it, we have to put it somewhere.
So how do you
So
improve your insulin without the GLP-1s?
it's through diet. So it's super easy to do. It's just not always simple. Or it's simple to do, it's just not always easy. But basically, I have a couple of different options for my clients. So when they come to me, based on getting to know them a little bit and getting to know their preferences and how they already know themselves, because when they come to me, I'm not the expert on them. They are. You are, Madison, the
Yeah.
expert. So we kind of have some options. I can say, all right, we have this 3 week option. It's going to be a little bit harder. We're going to go a little bit more in depth, but we're going to pull away a lot of, if not all of the carbohydrates for 3 weeks. And we're going to see a huge change in your weight and we're going to become more metabolically flexible. And what I mean by that is without the carbohydrates for energy, we're going to teach our body what it feels like to use fats again. And there's some supplements that we can take to help with that. But once you start to be able to use fat for energy, now your body becomes metabolically flexible, meaning you can use carbs and you can use fat. But because you're not giving it carbs, it's using more fat for energy. Now, using fat for energy is not the same as burning body fat. Fat for fuel could lead to losing body fat. Um, so that can take about 3 weeks.
Okay. And so you mentioned a supplement. We'll get into that, but what was that supplement that kind of helps you assist with resetting the insulin levels?
So there's a lot. Things like berberine. There's a couple of there's some different forms, but berberine in general,
Which is in
a
pineapple.
yeah, it's in lots of stuff. And you can buy it on Amazon. I think I'm looking over here at my supplement stash. It's pretty cheap, and you only need about 500 milligrams, and you can take that 2 to 3 times a day. But if you pair that with an ALA and chromium, those three things are really going to help your body's response to insulin. So it's going to help with the blood sugar regulation and the insulin response. So the insulin gets released in an effort to bring down your blood sugar. If we can help your body bring down the blood sugar, then we need less insulin. So that's how we can make you more insulin sensitive. Think of it as like a tolerance. Like the first time you had a drink, you got drunk pretty easy. 5 years later, your tolerance is a lot higher. You can have a couple of drinks. So it's the same thing with your insulin. You need more insulin to do that same job.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
And then there's a supplement.
What's it called?
Yeah, there's things like ketones, which I've heard of.
Yep.
There's one in particular that's called BHB, ketone ester. Taking that in the morning, especially when we pull out all your carbs, it can be hard for your body to get rolling on using body fat for energy, or excuse me, using stored fat for energy. So having a ketone ester like BHB can be really helpful. It can help with the brain fog too if you're feeling a little bit sluggish from switching over to carbs to fats. And then things like carnitine, injectable or oral L-carnitine. You can buy those. The oral form you can get right at your local supplement shop. But because it's not very bioavailable, there is injectable forms of it, and those work at a much smaller dosage. but it's the
Okay.
same idea. So you're teaching your body to spare the carbohydrate to send it to your muscle, and you're teaching your body to mobilize the fatty acid that's been stored so that you can.
So you can
Did I
what?
lose?
No, you didn't lose me. You're good.
Okay. I can't see you anymore, so we'll just go with it.
Okay, we'll just go with it. Yes, exactly. We just go with it. Just spit out the information. That's what we're here on Next Madison for.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
so let's let's get into supplements, okay? Because there
sure.
are so many supplements on the market, and a lot of people are taking a lot of supplements they probably don't need and then are
Mhm.
missing. So what are like the key supplements? Everyone's like, oh, okay, I should take a multivitamin, a vitamin D, B12 for energy,
Yeah,
vitamin C. Like, where does it stop and what do you need? And it's just, I mean, my parents take so many vitamins a day. I tell them they've got the most expensive pee on the block.
and that used to be the really big knock against your vitamins was just you're just going to pee everything out. And in reality, it's only partially true because yes, you are going to pee out some of them, but you're not going to pee out everything. Your body's going to absorb and take in what it needs, and then you're going to excrete the rest of it through your urine and your feces. And then you also have fats, or excuse me, vitamins that are fat soluble, so they're just going to get absorbed into your body fat. Um, but if you can take a good methylated multivitamin, um,
Okay.
something that's going to have a pretty good blend of everything. Most multivitamins, especially ones that are methylated, are going to be pretty good already. The company Thorne makes some really top-notch stuff. 10x Health is one that I've used in the past. I know that their stuff is methylated. Um, so a good multivitamin would be step one. And then the
Go
next
back real
thing,
quick. What
yeah.
does it mean when it's methylated versus like,
So
a one a day which is a popular one that you see at like the grocery stores or the drugstores?
yeah, a good example of this is folic acid. So that's something that a lot of people have heard of, and we think it's just like a normal thing to be found in food. If you flip over like the ingredients on your bread or your white rice or pretty much
Right.
any starchy food, one of those first ingredients is going to say folic acid. And the reason that that's a problem is because there's a gene mutation that a pretty huge chunk of our population has that doesn't let you turn folic acid into methylfolate, which is the usable form for our body. Now, folic acid is a totally man-made substance that gets sprayed on all of our crops. And the problem with that is it can cause some digestive issue for people who have that gene mutation and they can't turn folic acid into methylfolate. So we want to get the vitamins that are already in their methylated form. So that's all that means. Nothing too fancy. We just want them as close to their natural form as we can get.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense. Okay. And what are some other important things? So you got a methylated multivitamin. You recommended Thorne and 10x Health have good supplements. What else?
The next is a really simple one. I want you to get hydrated first thing in the morning. So this could be
Yeah.
whatever your favorite hydration drink is. I personally use LMNT. Um, they have the highest dosing as far as your sodium, your potassium, and your magnesium. And the cool part about getting hydrated first thing in the morning is you're going to feel more energized over using something like coffee or caffeine. And the reason for that is because the caffeine receptors are the same receptors that um, that accept things like melatonin. So when we start to get tired, we take caffeine and we try to plug in those receptors in our brain so that the melatonin doesn't have somewhere to bind to. And if the melatonin can't bind to anything, then it can't make you sleepy. But the problem is when you wake up, most people still feel sleepy, and that's because we haven't shaken that off yet. We still have those receptors are full. So even if you take in caffeine, they don't have any receptors to bind to. So what we can do is we can get hydrated and allow our body to energize itself more naturally. And then, an hour or so later, once you've shaken off all of that and those receptor sites are fresh, then if you feel like you need some caffeine or a cup of coffee, you could do that if you still felt like you needed to. But a lot of my clients come back to me and they're like, I enjoy coffee and I'll have one now and then because I like the way it tastes, but I don't
Right.
feel like I need it.
Okay, so when you say get hydrated, how much water should one be drinking first thing in the morning?
So if you're going to use something like a hydration pack, like the LMNT, you could
Yeah.
have that with from 12 to 20 ounces of water because you're getting your electrolytes with that.
So any electrolyte powder is fine. Like I have this one, like the
Which
ozone,
one is that one?
ozone,
Uh, I'm not familiar with that one.
Ozaneki.
Yeah, I don't know. So what I would do is I would look at the ingredient label and just see how many milligrams of sodium, potassium, and magnesium there are. And there's like a baseline threshold that we want to get to, and the lower that number is, the more you would want to have. And when we think about hydration, we want to not necessarily think about how much water we're getting, but how many electrolytes we're getting. So you could essentially drink a ton of water so that when you go to the bathroom and you pee, it's clear.
Yeah.
But that's not actually a good sign. That means that you have essentially peed out all of your electrolytes and there is nothing left. So that's when we know that we've gone too far. You want your pee to be like a twinge, like a little bit of yellow. Um, and so you could have your electrolyte supplement first thing in the morning, and then you might have another one in the afternoon if you feel like you need it. But hydration's a pretty easy one to just monitor. Just, look when you go to the bathroom, and you have a pretty
So
good.
are we talking put an electrolyte thing in your water and we're talking 8 ounces of water? Are we talking 16 ounces of water like first thing in the morning? What's the optimal?
It's going to depend on your body size as well. So as a bigger guy, I'm just going to have more water. It takes a little bit more work to hydrate 275 pounds of tissue versus somebody who's half my size, like my wife.
Yeah.
Uh, but basically, I'm going to start off with those electrolytes in about 20 ounces of water. And then I'm just going to keep drinking throughout the day. And then, if I'm going to go to the gym, I know I'm going to sweat more. If I'm going to go do cardio later, I know I'm going to sweat more. So I'll have an extra electrolyte pack later on in the day
Okay,
as
so
well.
electrolytes first thing in the morning is key because I usually would do mine like in the afternoon.
Yeah, I would move that right up to the first thing in the morning, and just see how you feel.
Okay, interesting. And then try to wait for coffee for an hour.
Yeah. And then at that point, you might just feel like you don't need it. A lot of people are going to,
I like
leave
it.
because they like it. But it's nice to be able to enjoy it for the enjoyment's sake and not feel like you need it.
Yeah, that's true. So I'm gonna feel like if I start doing that, I'm just gonna feel more energy throughout the day.
Yeah,
Yeah, because you think about it, I mean, you're really not drinking any water for 7 to 8 hours a night. So you
exactly.
are dehydrated, and people run to coffee first thing.
Yeah, and I mean, that's obviously not gonna hurt you, but coffee is a mild diuretic, so you are going to become a little bit less hydrated, but at the same time, the amount of diuretic in your coffee also has water in it, so like you might be peeing a little bit more, but you're also hydrating because the coffee has water, so it probably is a net zero. So maybe nothing to worry about, but I would definitely go to the hydration pre-coffee or energy drink in the morning.
Yeah, no, and I like that electrolyte thing because I was literally waiting till like the afternoon, you know. So
Yeah,
let's get in before we kind of finish up here. I want to get into well, first of all, finish with the supplements that people should be taking, and then we're going to go into stress management tips. How about that?
Yeah, that's actually a good segue because the next couple of supplements that I would recommend are stress related supplements. So, a lot of people take magnesium for various reasons. My mom called me the other day and was asking me about her supplements, and I was like, "Well, why are you taking this?" And she couldn't really tell me.
Yeah,
She's like, "Because I heard it was good." Um,
right.
Magnesium is one of those things where it is responsible for over 300 enzymatic responses in the body or reactions in the body. So it has a hand in a lot of different things. And there are a lot of different forms of magnesium. There's some magnesium that can cross your blood-brain barrier and help more cognitively. There's magnesium that will help you feel less stressed. There's magnesium that will help you relax and help you sleep. Um, so for me, what I like to do is recommend a magnesium biglycinate, and that's going to help your body respond to stress a little bit better because most people report, at least to me and my clients, they report feeling above average stress on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And stress by itself is perfectly fine. Stress is actually a really good thing when it's managed well. However, when it becomes chronic, that's when the issues start to arise. So if we can help you manage your stress a little bit better. So taking a magnesium biglycinate with something like ashwagandha, and again, I
Yeah.
prefer ashwagandha KSM 66. It's just a different form. And then in the afternoons, you could take that with rhodiola, which is going to have a little bit of a stimulating effect. So you could get a little bump in your energy. But if you have a really stressful day and you're feeling like an 8 out of 10 stress, that's going to help you feel more like a 5 or a 6 out of 10 stress, maybe even better. I've had clients who are like, I don't know what's in this stuff, but my wife has said that I'm a different person. Like the things that used to drive me crazy don't bother me anymore. And so if we can get you to be less reactive, then that's always a good thing too, because now your decision making is better. And so that leads into stress management, like you said. And so being able to manage that stress is going to be huge.
Yeah. And then what about like vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin B, like lion's mane, like all that stuff?
Yeah, so lion's mane is the last one you mentioned. It's an adaptogen, and that can be really, really helpful. I don't know that it's something that everybody needs daily, but I really do like the adaptogen. So things like ashwagandha, lion's mane, cordyceps, reishi, things like that
Yeah.
are really helpful, and they can help your body have a more healthy, more strong stress response. Um, but I wouldn't say that's necessary every single day for every single person. Vitamin D is really, really helpful, but you want to take that with vitamin K so you can get the same natural absorption that we would get from nature, from the sun. Now, I live up in Portland, Oregon, or just outside there, and in the winters, it's just really, really rainy.
Yeah.
And anybody in the northern climate, like if you think way back to when you were studying the solar system, like the Earth tilts, and right now in the winter, or not right now, but in the winter, Portland in the northern hemisphere, we're tilted away from the sun, so we just don't get those strong vitamin D rays. So supplementing with vitamin D, especially more in the winter, is going to be really helpful for like hormone production and just feeling overall better. In the summertime, I pull that back a little bit because I like to make sure that I'm getting outside, but I'll still take it because most people aren't going to take too much vitamin D. Actually, if you get a really bad sunburn, you can like super dose vitamin D and help recover from that a little bit faster. Um,
Wow. Okay, that's good to know. So vitamin D with vitamin K. So like for example, like I have a D3 complex that I take, right?
mhm.
Should I also get a vitamin K complex?
If it's a vitamin D complex, I imagine there would be vitamin K2 in there as well. Most of the time, that's the case. But a D3 with the K2 is a pretty common combination of supplements.
Yeah, it doesn't even say what's on here. It just says D3.
Yeah, so then in that case, I might swap it out to something that's a D3 and K2 combination.
Okay, well, I'm almost out of it, so that's good to know. Okay, so
Perfect.
that's very interesting, I think, because a lot of people when they get their blood work from their doctor, a lot of people are deficient in vitamin D, which can contribute to bone loss, to cancer, to mood changes, all those different things. I mean, vitamin
Your
D is like such a key thing.
Yeah, and for men and women, we want to make sure that we have adequate testosterone. Women just need less of it. So making sure that you have enough vitamin D to adequately support your hormone response is going to be really helpful in as far as feeling good.
Yeah, 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 and your mood for sure, absolutely. Because people, I think a lot of women think like, oh, testosterone, that's for men. I don't need any. And it's like, no, you do need some of it. And if you don't, you're gonna be a real bitchy person. And nobody
That's
likes that. And you might not be horny, so you might get divorced.
Hey,
Okay,
you
we'll
know
keep it
what?
appropriate. I was kind of sorry. But yeah, so okay, so other stress management tools, obviously hydrating properly, taking the right supplements. Um, but let's talk about sleep. I mean, honestly, like people say, like get 8 hours of sleep, sometimes 9 hours of sleep. I have more energy when I get around six and a half, 7 hours of sleep.
Interesting. So we do know that there are people who have certain gene expressions that they will respond, not I won't say better, but they respond fine on smaller amounts of sleep. Um, a lot of times, especially with clients that I work with, it's the fact that they have gotten so used to sleeping for 4, 5, 6 hours a night that that feels normal to them.
Mm.
So when we can improve their sleep quality and get them to start feeling better, they're like, oh, okay, so maybe I do feel better at 6, 7, 8 hours of sleep. But there are people who fall into that category. So it's hard to say unless you really know. But sleep is one of those things where it's almost like the more you can get, the better. People don't often report sleeping too much because of how big hectic our lives can get.
Yeah.
Um, and sleep and stress are tied together. So having high elevated cortisol, chronic stress is going to affect how you sleep. And so when that starts to affect your sleep, then you're going to get less sleep and you're going to have higher cortisol. So it's a really vicious cycle. So improving the cortisol can help improve the sleep, which is going to help lower the cortisol, which is going to help improve the sleep. So those are things that we want to make sure that we're keeping a close eye on as well.
Okay, well, great.
And
Well,
so
this
there's some
was, yeah, and this episode was packed full of information. Like, thank you so much. I mean, there's so much. I mean, we're gonna have you back on to just focus on one topic because there's just so much more
yeah,
that,
I would love that.
that can be added. So where can people find you and learn more?
The best place to get a hold of me on Instagram, it's DP_fit. And we do have a website. It's unorthodoxexperts.com. But you're going to find pretty much all of my content, all of my information right there on Instagram. And then, Madison, for your listeners, I do have a couple of ebooks that I've written that I want to be able to give away to them as a thank you for listening. So if people need some help managing their stress and their cortisol, we do have a stress and cortisol ebook as well as a caffeine ebook. So it teaches you how to wean off caffeine if you've been having too much. It tells you how to use caffeine in the best ways, how to use caffeine to support your performance.
Okay.
So if any of your listeners are interested in that, they can follow me on Instagram and just send me a DM that says Madison, and I'll know exactly where they came from.
Okay, perfect. That sounds great. Okay, you guys, yeah, definitely go check him out on Instagram at DP_fit or on his website at www.unorthodox.com or on Orthodox Training
Unorthodox experts.
and
Unorthodox experts.
unorthodoxexperts.com. Okay, perfect.
That's the one.
Well, Dustin, thank you so much for sharing your fitness knowledge and how we can all feel better and look better, which is another key thing. So I appreciate you, and thank you to everybody who's listening, wherever you may be. We will see you next time to find out who's next.
Hey, your host here, Madison Malloy. Please make sure to subscribe to the show on all podcast platforms, and please rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. Also, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us at contact@nexttomadison.com. I thank you again for listening. Bye.